programs for the Sewing Connection, Series 14, Program 10. A couple of series ago, I thought how lovely it would be if I could dye some white man-made furs in colors to make collars for various coats and jackets. That idea certainly bombed as my pink batch came out white and my blue batch came out white. Color my world with the rainbow of fantasy furs now available. Let's look at the models as they're wearing collars out of those different colored furs. Notice how we've got some kind of bright pink fur on that burgundy coat in a little rounded collar. And then on the other two coats we have some shawl collars, one in plum and the other one in a blue. Isn't this fun? Okay, let's talk about those and see what we can do with some fur. For one thing, how did I make those collars? Well, naturally, you just start with a basic. You can always get the patterns easily that way. And what I needed is just the neckline and the shoulder slant. And so what I have done is, here's my front of the little pink collar, the big pink collar really, but it's just a little rounded collar because that coat had a high neckline. And then for the back of it, which is back here, it would just be, I'll flip it over and put the back template in. And it was just cutting the back there. So shoulder line would be here in between. So a very easy thing. You simply trace the neckline and you've got a collar that easily. And the same thing happened with the other one, with the fur collar, the V-neck one, the shawl collar. That also is just a matter of thinking, okay, I wanted that to come down to about my waist. It's a V-neck and it has to go around the back. And so this is how that worked out. Just around the back and down the front. So very simple to make a collar. It's simply a tracing of the neckline edge of whatever coat you put it on. So if you are making a coat that, or making it for a coat that you already have, fine, just put that coat down and kind of spread out the neckline and trace around it on some pattern tracer, and you can do the same thing. Well, these fur collars are kind of fun. They're very easy. And let me show you what else you can do besides this. Now, we're going to cut it, we're going to sew it, and it's a really quick project. But something else I have back here I'd like to show you that was really a fun project. I thought, wouldn't it be fun if we had, out of this colored fur, these fantasy furs, wouldn't it be fun if we had a reversible vest? And if the whole thing would be fur on one side and suede on the other side, and you could wear it either way. Now, for those of you who ski, wouldn't that be smashing under a sweater, a big heavy ski sweater? Wouldn't that be just terrific? And of course, this is a little stand-up collar, so it keeps your neck nice and cozy. And what if you wanted to turn that into a jacket then? What if the arms get a little too cold? Well, we can do that too. Here is a button-on jacket. And this jacket, you can see by the buttonholes. They're here and here are the buttons here and here. And so this jacket is just going to come down about waist length, and it's going to just come over. Now, if that sounds a little funny, you'll see it later on a model, and you'll see it all does work out very well. But the first problem you have is, how are you going to make that vest? So to make that vest, I simply use the patterner, and the only worry is, how much bigger are you going to have to make it? Because naturally it's going to be have to be bigger to go over a sweater, and also to get the fur inside you're going to have to add some inches. Well, I did it the easiest way imaginable. I just put that fur around me, and here's some of the blue. I just wrapped that fur around me and tried on something that I had made out of this, out of the same pattern, the same size and so on, just to see how it was. And I could see it didn't come together by about so much, so that's how much bigger it had to be. Actually, what I added to this was about 4 inches at the sides in order to make it large enough so that that would be a comfortable fit, not a tight fit, just sort of a loose fit. So it's something you just have to try out physically and see how it works. Well, let's do the collars, and then we'll do that vest. And while I'm at the patterner, maybe I better show you how to do the over jacket. Now, that also starts out as the same thing as this. This has the shoulder put on so that it's a cut-on sleeve, and instead of the usual set-in sleeve. So once you have this sleeve on, the other sleeve would be, just a set-in sleeve. Once you have this on, then it's just a matter of deciding how long you need the sleeve. And so how long I needed the sleeve, you measure from your neckline down to your arm to decide how long that sleeve has to be. And you just keep either going out straight, or I curved it a little bit. Right here I curved it just slightly so it goes down a little bit, and let me hold it out here so you can see that. And you can see there is just a little bit of a curve here at the end of the shoulder, and it goes down a little bit, not much. It's almost straight. But notice how I also have a raglan line there instead of either just kimono sleeves or instead of set-in sleeves. There is a seam here. And so to get a seam, that's also not much of a problem. You just have the whole thing there laid out on your fabric or on a pattern tracer or some paper, whatever. And you can see that where that comes is from right about here at the center front is where I started. And after I had the thing drawn out, I just took a pencil or a pen or some sort of a marker and made a line that came across here and came on down here. It's that simple. Then you just separate the two pieces, add seam allowances to each side where you separated it, and you can sew it back together again when you're doing it in fabric. So very simple to do these things. The back is the same way. It also starts here. Usually a raglan line starts at the neckline, which is fine too. You start at the neckline and go down, but it's just drawing a straight line, cutting it apart, adding seam allowances, however you do it. Okay, then once we have that pattern all fixed, and of course there I then added the extra so that I'd have room for the fur. And I didn't add really anything to the sleeves because I'm not going to have any fur in those sleeves. They're just lined. In fact, this whole upper jacket part is just lined. And I figure it's going to go over a sweater anyway that'll be warm. So it doesn't have the bulky fur in the sleeves. Just the body part of it does. Okay, well, let's cut this out. And to cut out this fur so that you don't have any mess and so that it looks as good as it possibly can, I always want to cut this against the grain. Now, this very definitely has a grain, as this is man-made fur, of course. But just as an animal would have a head up here and a tail down there, and that's the way the fur smooths from the head down to the tail. And so I want to cut the fur not in that direction, because if you do, even if you do this carefully, and when I'm doing this cutting, I'm not going through the whole thing with just big strokes. I'm only going to cut the knit backing, and that's all. And so whether you can do it more easily with big shears or little ones, try different tools that you have and see what works best. But if I cut it down here, even if carefully, I'm going to get some of those guard hairs on the fur. Therefore, I always cut it the opposite direction. So I'd lay out my pattern, and once I start cutting, here's the bottom of it, I would start down here and just cut through the knit only, however that is. And as I cut, I'm kind of rubbing this against the knit so that I make sure I don't go down and get any fur. If you just keep your shears kind of slanted up like this so that you can cut the knit only without the fur, then when you pull it apart later on, there isn't any mess. You have nothing whatsoever on your cutting table or flying around your sewing room, and it just makes a nice, neat job. And also the fur looks a lot better because you haven't damaged it at all. So you cut against the grain, but you sew with the grain because that's going to look nicer. Now, as far as cutting this out, I'll just spread this out a little bit, and you have to decide exactly how you'd put that collar pattern on. Now, if you think, well, there's no reason why this couldn't just be cut on a fold, think of what would happen if you'd cut it on a fold. Here, for instance, would be a fold. If you'd fold the fur there, except I don't have mine wide enough since I've already cut a collar out of it. But if you'd fold it here, all the down direction would be going sideways, and so maybe that isn't such a good idea to cut it on a fold. Maybe it would be better to cut this fur instead, this collar, so that you have a little center back seam here, and that way the fur would smooth downward, as it does not only on these that I've cut out but not made, but here I have a collar that's all finished. And you can see on this there is a seam up here, except it really is about invisible, but there is a seam right there at the center back, and then the fur smooths downward, and so it looks nicer, it wears better that way. Now, after you've cut that out, to put it together, to sew it on machine, you really want a very shallow seam. So be careful about that, or think about that when you're cutting. And usually I would cut things with about a 1/2 inch seam or a 5/8 inch seam. On this I just want, barely a 1/4 inch seam, because we're just going to zigzag those edges together. And in fact, I'll put this over there and zigzag it later, but let me tell you some other things while I'm here at the table. I'm also going to have on this a zipper. And you have to really do a lot of planning on something like this to make sure you don't go beyond yourself and do something that you then have to take out and redo. I want this to zip, and so of course if that fur comes right up to the zipper, it's going to get caught in it. Anytime you have a fur coat that zips, you need to have some suede or some kind of fabric in between the zipper and the fur so that it can't get caught. So that means I'm going to have to cut an extra band of the suede to put there to bridge the gap. And now it's perfectly safe to zip it up, and the fur isn't going to come near it at all. But as we zip it up, a little tassel on it might be kind of fun. It gives that extra little added touch that's kind of pretty. And also you have to decide what kind of a zipper is going to go in there. So I had some choices here of zippers. The one I opted for was the blue-green because I decided that went with it about best. But some other choices would have been, if you can't get one in the color you need, then some other choices that you might use are, here are just a couple of neutrals, this beige and this white, and these are both sides. They're reversible zippers in case you wanted to reverse this. Now usually these reversible zippers come in neutral colors and not in a whole range of colors. So I also opted to not reverse mine because I decided even if this is being worn over a big ski sweater, I'm going to want that fur on the inside, not on the outside. I want just the suede on the outside. Therefore, I did not use a reversible zipper, but they are available. If you're going to use one that reverses, you might think of coloring your world. So there are all sorts of green pens here, and even though it would be a gold zipper or a brass zipper, you might think, okay, would this look better if I would color it green, or if I'd color it a little bit bluer green? You might be able to find a color that just matches your leather or whatever your fabric is very nicely. Or here's another one. And I find that the one I used, that I purchased already colored, ended up about the same, really. So there was no sense in it. I decided I'd rather have it all colored. So you always have to make decisions and decide exactly what's going to work best. As far as this little tassel, the pull on it, that's just a piece of suede, and either use a rotary cutter or use your shears. And I simply cut a lot of little, very narrow slashes in that because I wanted these, only about 1/8 of an inch. So it might be just as easy, since it's short, to do it with shears. And after I had that all slashed, I rolled this piece up very, very tightly and put a little drop of glue there to hold it. And then I put another slashed piece on top so it would cover over it. And this is just stitched in place. And then as far as attaching this to the zipper, because it isn't very likely you're going to get that through the zipper, the hole that's there at the end of the tab, what I always do for that is just take some old piece of jewelry or an old belt. This is a chain belt. Take some nice little pliers that you can bend that open with, and then just take that link off. And once I have the link off, I can use that to attach the suede to the zipper. So it's just a nice connector there. Well, I think that if you have any extra, you can always make earmuffs, or you can do whatever you want with that extra fur, but that's later. I haven't done the earmuffs yet, or the headbands, or the hats, or whatever else you might want to make out of the scraps, because there are always going to be some. But let's go back here to the ironing board and think a little bit about how we're going to press that suede, because you can't press the suede at every point. Remember, that fur can't take any heat, so you can't get near that with the iron or you're going to melt it. Therefore, you have to do all the pressing while the suede is still just suede before it's been connected. And to press this suede, I have the wrong side up here, and I also have the faceplate on the iron, and so I really could, if I wanted to, press a seam in it or whatever, put it right on, but I'm only going to do that on the wrong side of the suede. On the right side, I like to always put a press cloth just to protect it, even if I do have the face plate on. And so you'd go ahead and steam that, steam the seam in or whatever. And what's kind of nice, you can buy these in notions departments in any of the fabric shops. these little velvet brushes work out well. I'll cool this off. Because if you do mash down that nap at all on the suede, it's nice to be able to just brush it up, just rough it up with this, and it looks brand new again. So really, you're not going to do anything to destroy it. It's here forever. You will wear this for 30 years, and there's no way it's going to be ruined. So let's go over to the machine and do a little bit of stitching here. And what I want to do with this fur is, as I told you, make a shallow seam, and then I'm just going to stitch it together. I'll put this collar together while I'm at it. And even though I don't have the right colors necessarily in the machine, it doesn't make a bit of difference because you're never going to see thread through this fur. Now, as I stitch this little center back seam together, for one thing, I'm going to put it on zigzag. But I don't want a really wide zigzag, so I'll push the control and make that zigzag, down to about, let's see what it looks like on 3. What I want to do is zig on the fabric and zag off it. So I just want to cover the edge and close it there, but I don't actually want a seam. So you get all the fur between the layers here, get it out of the way, and then as I do the stitching, I want to make sure that the needle goes both on and off. And once it is starting to stitch, okay, there it goes. And it looks like I don't even need the stitches that close. So I'm also going to adjust the stitch length and make it bigger because this knit holds it beautifully, and you just don't need to have that very small. And as you go along, keep on tucking in all that fur so that when you finish, it will look just terrific. You won't even be able to see that seam. As long as you get all the fur in there, it won't even show. And when you get to the other end, let's see what it looks like then. And you can see it's just a little shallow seam. There isn't much there. And when it opens up and you brush that fur, you can't see where it is at all. Here would be the down direction, and it simply doesn't show. So just little shallow seams. It's very nice. Okay, once you have that fur put together, and there's very little, this is a really simple garment, nothing but shoulders and side seams, and that's it. And then, of course, I do want to stitch the suede to the fur around where the zipper is. And, of course, here the problem, as I said, is the fact that you can't press it once you have it stitched. So the easy way is maybe you want to do this in 2 steps, maybe you want to do it in 1. I decided 2 steps were probably better because that way I could make sure that everything is really, really looking very nice. And here I want to get it back into the straight stitch mode again. So I'll just push it on straight stitch. And as I sew this down, what I have already done at the ironing board is put some interfacing in there because this is going to be that front band, and I need to have a little bit of extra heaviness there, a little bit of extra beef. And so I have fused that in, and yet I have left the seam allowances bare because I didn't want to get in any extra bulk. So at the seam allowances, not only did I leave them without interfacing, but I have folded them over and pressed them flat. So theoretically, I could just top stitch them on now, but if you want to be very sure, then you'd go ahead and straight stitch this in place. And here again, I don't need very small stitches, so I'll lengthen that a little bit and just make them longer to do the job a little quicker. And keep tucking the fur in here also because you want it to look very nice and not like somebody gave it a strange haircut. And once you get this completely in, then you'll be able to, and I'll just take it out and show you what it looks like. And it looks very nice, but I'll be able to smooth this fur back out of the way, get both the seam allowances over here toward the suede. If you want to trim away a little of that suede to eliminate some bulk, you can do that also. And then I'm going to top stitch it in lieu of pressing, because since you can't press, this is the way to keep it really flat. And if you're going to top stitch, you decide how far away. Find some little marking on your presser foot that will tell you where you can get it to a standard width. What I'm doing is right where the plastic and the metal join. That's where I'm putting as the 2 fabrics join. And by the time I have that all stitched, it's just going to look very nice. Everything will be very flat. The fur stays out of the way, away from the zipper, and you won't have a problem. Now the next thing you're going to think about is, okay, here's the fur side. That's the lining. That's the inside of the jacket. I need to have a zipper in there, And I also need to have the suede coat on the outside, or whatever the fabric might be. Here the decision's going to be, do I want to cover that zipper, or do I want to have it exposed? Either way is fine. You decide. You're the designer here. You decide how you want it. I have my suede covering the zipper, and yet I have the back of it exposed. And that also staggers the bulk. So here's what mine looks like. The fur side is like this. The suede side is like this. And it works out very well, and nothing seems the least bit bulky. So this is how that is all made. As far as the little over jacket goes, that's just simple sewing, because you treat leathers and suedes the same as you would really any other fabric. So nothing to it there. What I also have here, in fact, before we go on, maybe we ought to see what that looks like on a model. Shall we do that? Okay, let's see it on a model. And of course she has a sweater on, it's cold weather. And let's just put the vest on. And this vest, as I said, either way. Put it on with the fur side out or with the suede side out, and it looks just terrific on her either way. But you have to have the suede side out if you want to wear it as a coat. So she'll zip up the vest, and our other model here will just help her on with her coat. And that button's at the back of the neck, and then the 2 buttons down each side in the front. There's another one which you don't need to button, but it's under the arm. And so there are just those few buttons under it, or on it, and so very easy to convert from one to the other. Well, the whole fur and suede thing was fun, but I have some silk to show you also. I'm wearing a silk blouse, and I saw this, one almost like it, in a catalog, and it was very pricey, and I thought, I can do that. What it had on it was an applique, or really a pocket applique on, yes, but on that pocket was some embroidery, and the embroidery is so pretty, and almost all new machines have embroidery capability now, so let's do a little of that. Here's what I have used. This is a new memory card, and it has not only the initials done in script, but it also has some pretty flowers growing around them, and I thought this might just be a fun one. Let's do this. And so I already have my silk in a hoop, and also I have it backed with a little bit of interfacing, and I have some stabilizer behind that. And so I just need to take off this foot and put on my embroidery foot. And then I'm going to put the hoop in, and we will call up the design that I want, the pattern I want, and we'll see what we can do with that. Okay, and the hoop back here, and it just clamps onto that arm. And then I want to get the presser foot down, and let's go back to the menu, and we will go to automatic embroidery. And, well, since my last name is the one that came up, I'll just do that. What I did on my blouse is all one color, so I didn't push any other buttons at that time because I wanted to just make it all the same color as my blouse so that it blends in. Here I'm going to maybe do it in 3 colors. Therefore, instead of just leaving it as is, I'll push the color select. And notice what comes up on the indicator here is that there are 3 colors. The first one is the opal green for doing the stems and leaves, and then I have a bright blue for the initial and a pale pink to put the little flowers on it. So it tells you exactly what to do, and I'll do just about what they say. I already have turquoise in there. I'll just leave that, and then I'll push the start button, and away we go. And after I get away from this just a little bit, I'll go ahead and cut off the thread so that it won't get involved at all. And what I'm also going to do is, well, I'm not going to do anything, I guess. Let's just go ahead and let it go, do its thing. While it's doing that, I want to tell you about the scarf I'm wearing. Now this scarf and another one that I have here, you know how often when you sew, you have a big strip of just fabric, just narrow fabric left at the end? Well, if you have a big strip like that, Here's one thing you can do with it. I wore this a few weeks ago, and this is just a big long scarf. Oh, it's about 60 inches long, which is the scrap I had left over from a couple of projects. And so since it was just a narrow scrap, oh, about 10 inches wide probably, I thought let's just sew those two together. And if I wear it this side up, the metallic kind of shows through, or I can wear it with the other side up and it looks just fine. Or the other scarf is the one I'm wearing. And this one was just a little bit, I had about a half yard of this chiffon, which is pretty. It looks like it's kind of a painted chiffon. And so it just has a little pattern in it, not a definite design. And so with this, it wasn't long enough. It was 45-inch fabric. So this is where I added a little of the blouse silk to the bottom of it to make it longer. And also it's easy to wear that way because that blouse silk is heavier and it just holds it down like a ballast back there. So however you wear it, whether in back or whether you bring it around the front, it just makes a very easy scarf to wear and one that you might want to make out of your scraps. Well, let's see what we have by now. We have some of the outline all done, which is the leaves and the stems around. The initial would come in later. But isn't this a neat idea, the fact that you can do anything you see commercially? And in fact, anything you do see, anything you do dream up, you too can do it. A little color can certainly brighten your life, and sometimes a few other items in the same color family really expand the wardrobe. In fact, I have a lovely hand-loomed fabric that would go with these pants and with this blouse very nicely. Come back next time and we'll see what it produces.